Welcome to the Citizen 7 podcast. My name is Chris Spangle. I'm happy to be your host, and we are here with Greg Enos. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Chris.
We are also joined by Don Palmer. You'd never know it because he declined to be on screen. He's off the screen here.
But I am accounted and present.
and so
he's looking good.
He'll be joining the conversation. And today we're going to talk to Scott Lingle and Aaron Story about their friendship and their shared projects. Scott Lingle became a founder at age 45 and launched 2 tech startups and in health insurance benefits, and now devotes most of his time to Side Hustle School, which we will talk about. And joining us on Zoom, thank you so much for being here, Scott.
Thanks, Chris.
And joining us on Zoom is Aaron Story, who has served as Elevate's president and CEO since January of 2018. And Aaron is an active foster parent, basketball coach, community developer, and Near East Side resident. Thanks so much for being our guest, Aaron.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Good to be with you.
Now, Don, when we were talking about who we wanted to have on this conversation, what we want to do moving forward is a series of conversations between 2 friends and how Citizen 7 brought them together in their shared projects. This is a great start. So tell us a little bit about Aaron and Scott and why you wanted to invite them on and how their relationship formed before we talk to them about it.
Yeah. My college roommate, Steve Kostler, had started a program in Orlando when he lived down there. He scoured the country and wanted, from a best practices standpoint, make something happen that really had results, that would be metrics that truly help people be moving up, have some upward mobility, and found this Elevate program. He moved to Indy, and Aaron, we hired Aaron, and Aaron didn't just take the job, but he really saw it as a calling. So I was on there, one of the co-founders, the founding board, and really appreciated just the dedication that Aaron had for bringing good people around him. Scott and I have been in a couple of different groups together called Faith Driven Investor and Faith Driven Entrepreneur, in addition to having a mutual friend in Jay Height at Shepherd Community. And Scott is always looking for a way to serve, to do something good. And he was starting a thing called Sweaty Startups and saying, why should entrepreneurship be restricted by zip code? There's entrepreneurs right here in the city, right in the zip codes. So they don't have to be in Carmel, Noblesville, Westfield, Zionsville. And Scott really had a conviction about that. And when I looked at Aaron's commitment to the Near East Side and what they were doing with character, and I looked at Scott's passion for making this thing happen and just seeing kids thrive and have the self-confidence of not just being served, but really doing something and being empowered to have their own business. Got the 2 together and great things happened. So that's why they're here.
Yeah, so before we talk to Aaron and Scott, Greg, this is the DNA of Citizen 7. This is really what you're trying to achieve with the organization, these relationships.
That's right. There's lots of individual networking and extractive networking where you can come around and say, I want to be with those guys because I can get this and that. I can guarantee you with Aaron and Scott and other guys like them that we're trying to encourage and hold arms with, they're generous with themselves. I can attest to that personally with that. And it's exciting to share this conversation with other guys that want to know really how to be generous with the gifts God has given them to love this city in the name of Jesus.
So let's start with Aaron. Let's give a plug to Jay Height. Shepherd Community has a great podcast. It looks great. I actually, to prep for this, saw Aaron on there. Tell us a little bit about Elevate. What is Elevate, Aaron?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, guys. Good to be with you and have a few other friends on here too that have been great contributors to our city's kids. Yeah, Elevate Indianapolis ultimately exists to build long-term, life-changing relationships, equipping students to thrive and contribute to their community. And it's a unique in-school, after-school, 24/7 holistic model. So we're in school teaching character, life skills, soft skills, leadership development during the school day, fully immersed in the public IPS schools, and then after school mentoring those same students. In addition, it's spring break, summer, it's year-round mentoring. So everything we do, we think about not programmatically, we think about in the context of a mentoring relationship. How do we build safe, established relationships with our students that then lead towards the kind of outcomes that maybe our community gets excited about, graduation rates that are high, and that kind of upward mobility that Don mentioned earlier. But that comes from years of established, safe, and trusted relationships that our full-time teacher mentors provide. So they're not doing an hour a month or an hour a quarter. They're full-time staff. They're immersed in the school day, immersed after school, providing that environment for students to build assets that are necessary for life and to move towards thriving, contributing is our language. Long after high school, we always say that you graduate from high school with Elevate, but you never graduate from Elevate. So we want to always be present with our students and how important that is for them to have access to a safe and trusted mentor that becomes a whole lot more than a mentor, but from the simplicity of the language, we just call it a mentor.
So Scott, what is it about Elevate that attracted you to reach out and connect with Aaron?
Yeah, thanks to Citizen 7, Don Palmer. I think he helped make the connection. We just met literally in the last year, and I was struggling to get this program out of the gate. I think year one, we had 3 to 5 kids, and we did have some success stories. But what I loved about Elevate, they're integrated into both Tech High School, Purdue Poly, a few other schools. And because of the relationships, they really brought a lot more kids and the right kids. So we are thriving this year. I think we've got 12 kids, 10 that are just knocking it out of the park. And huge thanks to Aaron and his team for really helping us with those relationships.
Yeah. So did that relationship lead to the development of Side Hustle School? Or where did the idea for Side Hustle School come in? Talk a little bit about the origin of that.
Yeah, great question. So it really originated with, we talked earlier about Jay Height, Shepherd Community, who also is a partner here on the Near East Side, doing great work. And Jay and I have been friends for a long, long while. And he approached me about 3 years ago and he said, Shepherd, the mission is break the cycle of poverty. They primarily have done that with a lot of education, mentoring, tutoring, funding for kids that wouldn't normally have a shot at going to college. And he said, not every kid is wired to go to college. Some need to be going into trades and some need to be going straight into entrepreneurship. And he said, could you help us lead that program? And so last year was year one, and we had 3 to 5 kids that we helped build. Originally, it was called Sweaty Startup.
Okay.
And the girls didn't love that name so much. So we pivoted and we're now Side Hustle School.
Okay.
But just like it sounds, we're helping kids build side hustles, and we'll fund them up to $5,000 per kid to build like pressure washing business or car detailing. The girls are doing like hair salons, eyelashing, so stuff like that.
Why side hustles? Why focus in on like a side thing as opposed to, hey, go all in on it?
Yeah, side is where it starts. They're full-time students.
Mhm.
A lot of them are also athletes. They got a lot of extracurriculars. So it starts as a side hustle, but then hopefully 3 different outcomes. One, it could be a side hustle for life that just helps them get some extra income to pay for school or whatever the path may be. 2, it could be a temporary thing that they put on the resume. It just helps them get great skills. We're teaching kids how to do sales, marketing, customer service, accounting. So those are skills that are going to serve them for all of life. And 3, it could be that they turn into full-time entrepreneurs. I think this year we'll probably have 2 or 3 that'll do that.
And please, Greg, Don, feel free to jump in. I don't want it just to be an interview. I want you guys to join the conversation. We will ask all of you at the end if you have questions for either our guests or Greg or Don. Please raise your hand. We'll do that afterwards. I heard Jay say something in that interview with Aaron that I thought was really interesting, which leads me to the next question. Organizations don't partner with each other. Side Hustle School and Elevate don't partner with each other. Aaron and Scott partner with each other and work together. The same with Aaron and Jay. How did a partnership, a relationship between you two form? Did it start with lunch? And then what were the key points that you really connected on and said, hey, me too?
Yeah. So thanks to Citizen 7, I think we got connected through Don Palmer. We had a coffee at Parlor Public House right around the corner here. Start dreaming up. I was like year one into the program and said we could really use some help. And we're not in the schools. Like we don't know the kids. And so we started dreaming up what this could look like. And we had a meeting with Aaron and his team and said, here's what we're trying to do. Do you think you could help? And they came alongside and helped in a huge way. And not only that, but gave us a ton of ideas on how to make the program better. We, because of Aaron, now have an application process. We'd never had that. Helped us really zero in on not just more kids, but the right kids. But thanks to this group here, like Aaron and I didn't even know each other.
Yeah.
So that's been super cool.
Don, what was it in Scott and Aaron that you saw that you said, hey, these guys need to meet?
They're both drivers. They're both kind of type A's, and their motives are pure. They are about helping others flourish. So it was a natural because their interests aligned.
Yeah.
I was going to ask,
go ahead.
yeah,
Please.
no, I was going to ask Scott, how many of your 12 are in Aaron's Elevate?
Aaron, you know better than me, probably 10, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty close to that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's out of the 10 on the website, 9 of them are ours, and obviously there's been a few others too. So we're excited about that.
So let me break this down just for people who are tuning in, and I don't want anybody to be confused. How do your programs, if you're one of those 10 students, what does Elevate do and what does Side Hustle School do that kind of mesh together? What's the differences for the actual participant?
Yeah. I think of it this way. So Elevate's kind of top of the funnel. They have the relationships, have had them for some of these kids 4 years now or longer, and they help bring the kids to the program. We actually meet at Elevate every Tuesday, 4 to 5. They got an incredible space right across from like Purdue Poly, which a lot of kids go to. And then we've recruited a ton of mentors, a lot of them through Orr Fellowship. So we have 40 mentors that show up any given Tuesday at 4 to 5, usually a 1-to-1 ratio of mentors to students. And we'll work through week 1 is like, what ideas do you have? And the ideas need to be, can you learn how to do this on YouTube pretty much?
Yeah.
So we're not looking for heavy trades. And then can we buy all your supplies like week 3 for $1,000 or less? That's what constitutes the definition of what we're trying to build. And we got kids already, at $5,000. I think one girl's like doing hair at $7,000. We started in January.
Wow.
Pressure washing, David Arellano has got like almost 5,000 on the board. So these kids are like building legit businesses. It's pretty cool.
Did they go ahead, Greg?
No, that's where I was going. I just wanted to understand the cadence of how you guys work together. What's that playbook? You're working with Jay, but you're going straight to Elevate to get your kids. Is that, or does Jay somehow work with you?
Yeah, good question. So the way we think about it right now, we're targeting the Near East Side. We reached out thanks to Don and you guys, not only to Aaron, but we also looped in Youth for Christ and Dream Alive, because all these are partnering with Tech High School, Purdue Poly, kind of on the Near East Side, and they've got those relationships. We have no way to reach out to kids in that area. So they bring in their top of the funnel, they bring in all the kids, and then we run the programming every Tuesday. And we start in January, we run through the end of the school year, and then we are going to continue to meet in June and July. And basically it looks like this. Every week we come in, week 1, we come up with the idea. And then with the mentors, we create a business plan, like very simple, 1-page business plan. 2, we create a financial model or a pro forma. And then once they do that, they check the box for both of those, we're ready to fund them. And funding is typically figure out everything you need for your car detailing business, pick it out on Amazon. And we literally right there in class, buy all their supplies, ship it right to their doorstep. Then the next step is we want to know that they're really going to do this. It's not going to sit in their basement. We make them go find 3 jobs. We say, hey, friends and family, whatever it takes, go knock out 3 jobs, prove that you're going to make a happy customer and they're going to write you a check.
Yeah.
And then come back and then they're ready for the hard part. The hard part of any of these is getting leads. And so it's just like any business, right? That's the hardest part. We then help them stand up a website. And then we begin to test on social media, and it could be traditional means too, door hangers, but probably the most so far, how we've gotten the most leads. And this is why I'm anxious to be on this call is we've got a website called sidehustleschool.org. And we've got all their business profiles.
Yeah.
And I've been blasting out to my network to say, hey, who needs car detailing? Who needs pressure washing? And believe it or not, we've loaded these kids up with 50 leads.
That's great.
Just from getting the word out on LinkedIn and emails to a lot of business owners.
Yeah.
And the more I can do that, the more I can start improving these kids' lives.
That's great. We're going to blast it out on our Praxis monthly newsletter.
Love
500 people. We're going to blow this open there. May I just ask one follow-up?
Yeah,
there?
please.
So Aaron has a cadre of students he's working with, but you're going beyond those who are Elevate participants, of course. Are you ready to just keep it low? Are you ready to blow this open and say, Greg Enos, go find me some students on the north side or the east side? bring them in.
Yeah, you know me well, Greg. I'm not interested in doing anything small.
Yeah.
So, I'm all about let's scale. And so we feel like I'm an entrepreneur. We feel like we've gotten product market fit with Near East Side, focusing on tech. And now the goal is I've got a buddy of mine, Peter Servas, that is just a good friend of mine. And he has a passion and heart for the same thing. And he was the one that planted the idea is, hey, let's go scale this to all of IPS. So the dream for next year, and there's a lot of work to be done, is how can we scale this and have more than one site? We'll continue the meeting at Elevate for the Tech Purdue Poly kids, but how can we like build this for all of IPS? It's going to take more mentors.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm not looking for like a full-time job. I'm looking to lead the effort, but going to take a lot of help.
That is beautiful.
There seems to me around Citizen 7, the various praxis groups, like there's seed funding seems to be important, especially in the Far East Side with the folks that you're working. I'll open this to Aaron, to Greg, to you, like Scott, the importance of seed, this studio space, builders and backers from the Indie Redemptive Labs is built by that. It came out of that, right? So it's helping my business, which I'm doing the Citizen 7 thing to help, right? Like that seed funding can give such a leg up. Can you talk about not just that principle, but then also going a layer deeper to communities that need that leg up, right? I could have bullied my way through there. It was helpful, but when you don't have any network, when you don't have any connections, when you don't have any natural leads, how much more important does that network effect and that $5,000 become?
Yeah, well, the two guys in this room, of course, Don introduced me to Aaron. That's been incredible.
And Aaron, we're coming to you next, I promise.
Greg introduced me to Faith-Driven Investor Group. So another informal group. We meet once a month, and they have actually provided the seed money for this program. So both year one and year two, I tapped that group, and we haven't had crazy amount of money needed, but so far they've been the funding support for this program. So that's been huge.
Greg, you want to address that, Don?
No, I mean, they said it all.
Yeah,
That's
all
how
right,
it happens.
great.
It's little seeds. And look what now, Scott, I'm really excited to hear about the scaling vision. You're going to need more capital.
100%.
And,
Yeah.
But I bet people on the call here are going to be very interested in seeing that. And thanks for the website. I didn't know that you had a new name, and I'm going to check that out and start floating it.
The website's beautiful. It looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aaron, so let's go back to the cadence of working together. How does Elevate and Side Hustle School, and then more granular, Aaron and Scott, work together? How does that begin? And then what does that partnership look like on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I think certainly echo everything Scott had shared, initial conversation, give some feedback around what I felt would be just my feedback to what would make this successful, to what is, once he clearly establishes goals. And then on our end, internally, working with our team of mentors and who have long-term relationships and established. And so I think I knew, and I told him, I knew the students, I knew there'd be students there. I wasn't worried about that. I knew we'd have students that would be of interest. We know our students, we know our data, what tells us about who we serve and how we serve them, and where the gaps are at for opportunity. And so I feel pretty good about that early on, but figuring out what was that progress, what's that process look like? And so we had to do, blocking and tackling a little bit, and ended up it is at the Impact Center, which I see Pastor Mike is on here. So we actually lease a space from Inglewood, and so the CDC, and so we're rooted in the Inglewood neighborhood, just to say where that Impact Center is at. But I think, and then our staff are fundamentally helping, like they're the follow-up with students. They're, in some cases, we have a couple of staff that are picking up, dropping off students every week. So there is that piece of it. Some students drive, and some students have a friend that drives it over, but a lot of our kids don't have cars. That's not their situation. And so doing the follow-up communication, or working through, or a kid falls off for a couple weeks, a couple of staff that are following up, checking in on them. How are you doing? What's going on? How can we get you back and keep you connected here to this opportunity? So I think on that side of the relationship, that's really everything. So many of the students that we serve, the issue isn't character, it's not integrity, it's not vision or dreams. It's not, despite some of maybe the public narratives or the stuff that makes the news, that's not really the reality for most of the kids that we serve. It's lack of opportunity, into what I think Don or maybe Scott said earlier, it shouldn't be, no limits should be placed just because of zip code they were born into. All of us are born in the situation we're born into. Some of us were just born straight into privilege, whether we are aware of it or not. Two parents is a privilege. And that's statistically across all generations now. That's been proven out. And so you think about a lot of those dynamics. We have incredible students. They're full of assets and dreams and hopes. And how do we bridge that? And at the same point, I think historically, at times, some of the challenges, this is obviously, I think, partially what makes this work is people that outsiders with good intentions and money by itself, historically, sometimes in our country, have done a lot of damage. And Christian churches will get a lot of damage. And so this nature of making sure it's rooted with inside student voice, people that have established relationships, so we can have an equitable place at the table for folks to have, students have a voice in it. And obviously, you know, that's a give and take, and that's a work in progress, but I think that's necessary to make something successful as well. So I'll hit pause there, Chris. But
Hey, Aaron, I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah,
Aaron.
please go for it.
What are you expecting from Scott's 10 entrepreneurs, the vibe, the culture that they're bringing back to the Elevate community that you want to see grow? Anything unique there amongst these guys and gals who are working?
I guess my initial interest in this, where I felt like the greatest win here initially is like the 9 of them that are vetting out their Elevate students that live, work, play, worship in the communities and predominantly under-supported communities in our city. I think on one end, it's a safe place to fail. It's house money they're playing with. I think somebody willing to build the potential dream, knowing that entrepreneurship is as much failure as it is success. And a lot of people on this call can attest to that. Our students aren't afforded that privilege. And so I think on one end, can they dream a dream? Can they potentially start a business of looking at some of the faces on here, Calvo and David and some of the great young men, but nobody is going to give them $2,000 to help start their business. And if it fails, i.e. it doesn't turn into this money churning, deal, what would they be on the hook for? So I think on one end, a place to incubate and cultivate that safe place to fail. I saw the biggest success is not that I don't want to see these all be successful, thriving businesses. I certainly do. But I think the biggest assets early on, I told our team, is relationships they're going to meet and make with the people in the room is huge. I think the stuff they'll learn along the way, so all this just from a business language terminology and investment, they're not learning that in any other way. And they're not meeting these folks in any other way. They're not getting a chance to network with Scott and his volunteers. That's not occurring in any other circle of most of our students' lives. And to me, the successful business was like really icing on the cake. I think the cake was a lot. Now Scott may not say that, but when I think about long-term economic mobility for students to be thriving, successful, it takes who you know, who are those relationships, what's it look like, who can vouch for you, who can write letters of support, that takes access to the right networks of people. And so for me, I felt like that was as much successful as whether Calvo's interior car cleaning business becomes. Statistically, it's probably not going to be a full-time sustaining, like how many interiors only can you clean in Indianapolis. But that by itself can be the flywheel that leads to something else that could be. And that the more guys and gals that meet Calvo, all of Scott's connections here, all own businesses or working businesses. Calvo's an incredible young man. And my hope is this can be a bridge to the bigger thing. And at Elevate, we really pride ourselves in being bridge builders and door openers based on relationship and dignity and equity. And so if we can give these kids exposure to people that have much more influence, maybe this is the turning point that leads to something much bigger in 5 years down the road.
Yeah. I might insert something here. Former Deputy Mayor Jeff Bennett shared with Citizen 7 Group, I think a year or two ago, that Indianapolis was 47th out of 50 major cities in terms of upward mobility. So we were really bad. And I had the pleasure of hearing David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, last week when he came up to Indiana Wesleyan to speak. Asked him a few questions. He was involved in some really cool programs. But he said the number one most effective factor for upward mobility is cross-class friendships. So all of a sudden, I didn't even know the Orr Fellows were involved. But all of a sudden, these kids are getting to know Orr Fellows who they're changing their world in terms of some of the mentors and the relationships. And I think what Aaron alluded to is those relationships last. And you now have a proponent, a a champion for you to say, hey, you go, and I'm going to use my network, and I'm going to use the things that God has given me to do better.
Hey, a quick plug again. Citizen 7 introduced me to Stephen Emch, who runs OR. And it was that connection that I thought, okay, here's a group of aspiring entrepreneurs, in some cases, or just folks that are out there doing a lot of good and have a lot of talent to offer. And probably out of my 40 mentors, I bet 20 OR fellows. And not only that, they have taken on, they do a consulting project every year for a nonprofit, and they picked us to help us with the scale project.
And for anybody briefly, what is the OR Fellowship? Just
these guys can probably explain it better than me.
Brief.
You guys want to take that?
My son, Chris Palmer, was an OR Fellow. He's now hired OR Fellows, but it is a very highly competitive program that the state of Indiana has. I think they have over 800 applicants for about 40 to 50. They're all placed with typically high growth companies within central Indiana, and they're all paid the same. They get the same benefits. It really becomes quite a fraternity/sorority of just a great network of people that care. Oh, I'm an OR Fellow. Hey, I was one 10 years ago. So they're all really talented folk that have been chosen to be in a 2-year program where they do 3 rotations through the company that they're with.
Our friend Jim Jay is chairman of the board. So we have very close connections with that cadre of employees.
Yeah. So Aaron, you mentioned retention, right? How much more does the entrepreneurial piece of what Side Hustle School can bring in? Does that help improve? Because now there's that sense of ownership. There's a sense of purpose. Have you noticed any kind of difference when people are trying to invest in their business and now they see something that is possible that they never thought might be possible? Does that improve that you're having to check in less with some of your participants?
Maybe long term, you have to see. That isn't a goal of ours, really. And so our relationships with our students, their mentors, some of them are seniors, they're going to graduate. Life's going to be what happens next, right? Some of them are juniors. Most of them are. We got about half, and I'm just thinking, I think of the list here. But so seniors are graduating, they're moving on to what's next. And so there'll be a lot less checking in because they're moving forward, right? But our relationship equity with our students, we want to be the same through highs and lows. And that's what allows us, Scott and I were talking yesterday, and that's a lot of the benefits that come to be able to be them so committed this season is because of 3-4 years of relationship in place that Elevate has been doing. And so we hope to be able to stay in place with them, whatever their next season is. I think to your point, high tide raises all boats. And so, or success breeds success. And so they can experience some success here. This is one area, the 7 areas of our holistic wellness is financial and vocational. When you get into that social, emotional, and physical, you get into a lot of dynamics. A lot of our students, again, this didn't shock me that we'd have this many students committed. Because I told Scott at the beginning, hey, there's a lot of great kids here that need opportunities, that deserve it. The problem in our city is not the kids, to Don's stat here. That's not the problem in our city. We have incredible kids. We could stop importing students from Chicago to go to our city schools. If we could just export and develop the talent we have inside our own city better, we'd have decades and decades of talent. We don't adequately enough develop, retain, support the talent within our own city, all the talent within our own city, not preferential of it. And so I say that to say this is one area, but the reality is, Chris, a lot of students that we serve, they're going to go through this group of kids right here. I just know a couple of them I know pretty well, are going through a lot still. And it takes a lot to keep the train on the tracks because of the other areas of life to no fault of their own, most cases. And so I think, I'd like to say that right now, this just is sort of startups and side hustle. All of a sudden, it's just boom, now they're set. That's not the reality of who we serve. And it takes a lot of wraparound relationship engagement. Now, this could be the engine, though, that drives motivation to the next thing. And for 3 or 4 of them, I would say that I could clearly see that happening. And that is the hope that maybe that their cousins, their neighborhood, their block, their schools, their community is the driven part of our mission statement. Ultimately, we see ourselves doing community development work through students started in the schools, but goes into a much bigger picture. And
hey, Aaron, Can I ask you a question? Scott talked about scaling through IPS. What's Elevate's vision to get through permeate IPS and beyond over the next few years?
You're asking about Scott's vision?
No, your Elevate's vision.
Yeah, we're deep in IPS, I would say, and as there are opportunities for other school systems, as the Lord provides resources, for certainly there are, but we want to be where there's the greatest opportunity and the greatest need. And where we're at now, we really feel like IPS is big. That I know we talked about Near East Side locationally wise. Calvo, who I mentioned, is on that list as a Washington student. Washington and Tech are those are our anchor schools. And then we have Shortridge, Purdue, Poly, Inglewood. But IPS has really been an incredible partner for us. And so we see that as being, how do we double, triple down on that? Now, that's not say there are other opportunities, future conversations, sure. But for us, wherever we go, we execute our whole model. And we have 100% or near 100% graduation rate every year. And we have great things in place that come from the whole model being in place. College and career, sports and adventure, accredited classes, they're accredited by the state. And so that allows us. And then we see, opportunities like this was a huge one to be like, how do we help continue to cultivate? So we've got 3 or 4 students in One America's summer internship this year. I can go down the list here. We really try to know who are our students, how do we get to know them, what's the best opportunity for them? And that helps Scott. So we told him and say, we'll pre-vet. You won't have to do all the interviewing, we won't give you 40 kids to figure out. We'll pre-vet, pre-select based on who we are, who we think's more committed, who we think can do this. And we do that with every opportunity when we work with somebody. Who are the students that are the best fit for this specific opportunity? And you win some, you lose some still, but that's really, we feel like, comes from relationship and not from some program referral, and it's just a huge difference in a city saturated with nonprofits for kids. Often kids can feel like one more program they're in. They feel like one more number and referral. And we pride ourselves at being just one big family, which then leads to a different type of outcomes that all of us in our city can be proud of.
All right, so I've got one last question to the group, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So if you'd raise your hand, and then when we come back, I'll look at who's raised their hand. We'll go to you for questions. If you've got a question for Greg, Don, Aaron, Scott, that stat of 47 out of 50 major cities in terms of the lack of upward mobility. If somebody is watching this, listening to this, and we are on your podcast feed, we're on YouTube if you want to catch up with these. If somebody's sitting on the sidelines and isn't engaged in trying to help that upward mobility problem, what are a couple actionable steps that you'd recommend to somebody if they want to get involved? Scott, let's start with you.
Yeah, be part of the solution, not part of the problem, right? So God's given us, the way I think about it, God's blessed me with entrepreneurial gifts. And we were fortunate enough to have an exit. And I found myself with a lot of time, and I could either play a lot of golf and pickleball, which I do, or I could also, there's only so much that you can do, right? Before you get a little bored. And so I feel like God's calling me into almost like full-time ministry. And my ministry is, can I serve youth and help them to become entrepreneurs? And so it's fun for me. I feel like it's something God's blessed me with, and I feel like we're making a dent.
Aaron, thoughts on people on the sidelines, how they get into fixing that upward mobility problem?
Yeah, I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's hard at all. I think they're complicated problems that don't require complicated responses. I think compassion, this is not a time for a sermon, but I would say as a one in compassion and action is sometimes not real hard to do. And I think Scott gives a platform for that. Show up on Tuesdays, pour out what you've learned to some students, smile, encourage, give, make an effort. If that's not your thing, right? If it's like, hey, I'm not an entrepreneur, then find another way. But the last 7 years of being in this role, what I will say, and I've been working with students for a long time, longer than that, the problem's not the kids. And I also meet a ton of well-meaning adults that care, that want to make a difference. They don't know how. People with the resources and influence and privilege want to make a difference. They don't know how. And so working out that how is important, but there is ways to pour into it in a way that's not just one more drop in a big bucket. And I think this has been a great, Scott's modeled that to some extent. The picture of it didn't have to be this big. Everybody's why doesn't have to be this big. He's doing it, but it leads to an impact. If you live near North Central or you went to North Central, great, find a way to invest in there. If you went to Warren and you're passionate about that side of town, then double down on students out there. If you're not, you're neutral, then come serve with us. Come find a way to give, serve, engage with us. And I think it's a legacy thing for our city. And I think John shares that stat, and I've known that for a long time. I mean, I think it's on one end, that's a stain that has to get reconciled because it's not a stat. It's pain and trauma in the streets of our city that we've got to find a way to break through. And we have a segregated city, both culturally and then socioeconomically. What I love about Scott's program is it allows us to bridge worlds that often don't bridge. I'm guessing these OR fellows and Scott's other friends aren't coming across our students in any other area of their life. And I know predominantly our students aren't with us audience as well. And it can be a beautiful thing when it's done well. And so I think that's what motivates me, knowing that this could lead to much bigger things, and whether or not the small wins are great, but the big wins could be things that are help turn a city. And that's the potential I think we all together share.
I love the relationships that are embedded in that, just that conversation. Anyone with questions, comments, we'd love to hear from you now. We're here in the Zoom chat and there's lots of folks. Feel free to raise your hand or just go ahead and speak up. All right.
I know you're not that shy out there. This is Don.
Yes, go ahead, Joshua. You're on mute. There you go. Joshua, you're on mute.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now? Really enjoy both of what these organizations are trying to do. And I think I have a difficult question. Clearly, you both have space for investors to participate. There's probably a high bar level of volunteerism. Entrepreneur can come, mentor a kid, elevate side. There's a variety of ways to volunteer. But my question is, what's your lowest level of volunteer participation that you're ready to receive from the community of people on this call and a much wider region?
That's an easy question for me. If you visit sidehustleschool.org and hit the page that says students or our students, we have a profile there of, I think, 9 businesses that are up and running and they're ready to do business. And if you need your car detailed, if you need your house pressure washed, probably one of the best things you could do is sign up right there online and know that some of these kids, it's their 10th time doing this. So it's not going to be like, they're not going to necessarily knock it out of the park, but we're giving them reps to get better and better. And I think that's one easy way to contribute. The lift on volunteering is not huge. We ask our mentors to show up once a month. It's 4 to 5 at Aaron's place there on East Washington. And you could know very little about how to build a business. It's really like showing up and being encouragement for the kids. That's half the battle.
Yeah, I don't have an easy answer to that question, but there are entry-level ways for people to volunteer and make a difference. And we have our senior celebration coming up in May. And for example, there's a church small group that is writing notes to each of our seniors. We give a list of names. They're writing encouraging notes. We're going to include that with the gift bags that we're giving. That's an example of something that you won't find on the website, but when somebody says, hey, what could we do? And we're doing some golf stuff in June. We're going to do some stuff at the driving range. We're looking for volunteers to come and just help teach our kids how to swing a stick. And so we come up with ways to support based on what's the biggest need is. There's not like a come annual paint the fences with Elevate every year. We don't do that type of stuff. We don't own a big building. So we try to find ways to bridge something's meaningful skills and passions or their company with something we actually need that would be a value add, whether it be big or small. And so I dropped a link in the chat room. Obviously, you can reach out directly and connect as well. Great question.
You have a great answer. It's an important question. How are you going to let people in the front door? So I'm encouraged. Nice job.
And Michael, you're up next. You're on mute. So if you'd unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to the upward mobility part of the conversation. I would just say that about 4 years ago, Lilly Endowment launched an initiative called Enhancing Opportunities that specifically was calling for projects that would create what they called income mobility, which is essentially upward mobility. Our Inglewood Community Development Corporation was part of that, and we're doing what's called cultivating communities and working with about 7 or 8 churches here in Indianapolis for congregations to build capacity to contribute to either long-term income mobility or even short term in job creation and employment enhancement kind of things, but just supporting education, which is, right down the pike what Elevate does, that does enhance opportunities and that does create income mobility when students are supported in the ways that these two folks are supporting young people. So I would encourage people to look deeper into some of the things that Enhancing Opportunities funded from the Lilly Endowment. There could be opportunities for volunteering that way as well.
All right, let's finish with Greg and or Don. Any final comments? You hear the relationships in this, Greg, that are all working together to improve people's lives. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Aaron, both for being a light. I've been encouraged by it. What are your thoughts?
Jesus told us how we love God first and foremost, and that is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. I guarantee us that if we love our neighbor geographically, starting within our home and in our immediate neighborhood, you'll be ready for Scott and Aaron.
Yeah.
Opportunities will come. It cascades. It's like a little pebble hitting the lake. So we love our neighbor. And the second thing is, to whom much is given, much is required. That sounds like an odious command, right? Oh, I'm required. No, if you're loving your neighbor, it'll spill out of you. You'll have what God's given you, and you just want to give it back. You want to hire these entrepreneurs. You'll want to support Aaron and what he's doing. You want to mentor. So it's what Josh was talking about too. How do people get involved? Just start loving the person right next to you, and it'll permeate the city.
I'm an entrepreneur too. I imagine these kids, just their 10th job, 11th job. That has to be so exciting. Like that has to be a light in, what Aaron's describing is a complex situation with a lot of sometimes darkness.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot of energy in that room. We open up every week sharing the wins for the week and the challenges for the week. And
Great.
so it's cool to hear their stories for sure.
Don, final thoughts?
I know that Bob Buford, who wrote the book Halftime, challenged me with the question of what is it that you can't do by yourself that you need to do together? And I think that in terms of whether we're solving poverty, whether we're helping in education, whether we're helping our neighbor, the efforts that we're talking about here, to me, are a good antidote to selfishness. And I tend to be selfish, and I used to think it was how big the check is, but if it's a $50 check, if it's a $25 check, it's what it does to your heart. So I'm really encouraged by just seeing these bright points of light that are happening in our city, and Aaron and Scott have really knocked it out of the park.
Well, Scott, Aaron, thank you both so much for sharing your story and spending some time with us today.
Thanks, Chris.
And if you got something out of this, please share this with your network, share this with your friends. It just helps spread the message of what they're doing and what Citizen 7 is doing. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next month here on Lunch with Greg and Don.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.